Om Shanti. In just a couple of days, in fact, in 2 days almost exactly around this time, all of us will be sitting downstairs in Shantivan preparing to meet Baba. And I think whether it's our first time or our 100th time, it's still such a wonderful experience. And I'd just like to ask, who will be meeting Baba for the first time? Can I ask if you can put up your hands? Yeah, so many. Sometimes I love to take myself into the unlimited and just think of the fortune to sit in front of Baba even once. Now, when you think of all the souls in the world, how many are there? I think 6 billion plus. How many souls have the fortune to actually meet Baba face to face in the cycle, in eternity? It's just a minority. It's just a handful. And when I think of that, I think that what have I done in the past? What have we done in the past to earn this fortune? Every single one of us in this hall has made so many efforts for so many lifetimes to come to this point, to sit in front of the one soul who's eternally pure, eternally holds truth, and really is the one who is the beloved of everyone. And one of the things which many have said this season, and perhaps it's a bit of a strange thing to say, is that, oh, Baba was so loving. I mean, Baba is always loving, but it seems that this season everyone has been having such a feeling of how loving Baba is. And I think for me, one of the sweetest experiences is to actually, when Baba is there, to look at all the faces in the hall. If you have a chance, it's something so beautiful. Because when we sit in front of Baba, it's like we lose about 10 or 20 years. It's remarkable. It's like we all become young and all the faces sparkle. It's something so beautiful. There's so much love in each face. It's almost like Baba invokes the purity of love in each one of us. And I remember one scene which I witnessed many years ago, actually in 1980. I actually went to North America. I went to New York for a program, and I had 1 day's notice to go. Daddy Janki actually rang up me and Sydney, a few of us, and said that Didiman Mohini, who was the co-administrator of the Yagya in those days, was going to New York and we should go. So in 1 day, we booked a ticket, packed our bags, and left. And on the way back, I stopped in Madhaban. And it was quite a remarkable scene, actually, because one morning, we were sitting in the meditation hall in Pandav Bhavan, and morning class was going on. And Daddy Prakashmani, Daddy Ji, was reading the Murli. And a lot of Baba's main instruments from around India had arrived for a meeting. And so Daddy was reading the Murli, and every so often she would say, look, all of Baba's beautiful children are here. Baba should come and meet you. And then she'd read the Murli, and then she kept saying, oh, Baba must come and meet all his beautiful children. And so at the end of the Murli, this is like, 8 o'clock in the morning or 7:30, Daddy Gulzar was there, so Daddy Ji made her sit up the front. She said, come and go to Baba and ask him if he'll come and meet the children. And it was quite amazing. About 15 minutes later, there was Baba at 8 o'clock in the morning. He came at Daddy Ji's request. But Baba said, I haven't come to speak a Murli, I've just come to fulfill the love of the children. And that's a scene which is indelible in my intellect, because all Baba's old sisters, they all came up to Baba and they lay across his lap You could imagine this is at the time of breakfast. And Baba stroked their face and just gave them so much love. And I often feel that really at the heart of this life is this extraordinary pure love that Baba comes to give us. And no matter how challenging this life is, no matter how high we feel the destination, that when we taste that pure love, I think anything is possible. I really believe it's that love which makes it possible. And yet, many times Baba says to us, what is the return of that love? We all love Baba. And sometimes Baba says it's to become equal, and other times he says to bring a genuine transformation in myself. And this year, there's been such a focus, hasn't there? Baba's almost been saying, children, it's not that you should transform, you have to transform, hasn't he? It's been like, and Baba's been saying we need to have such determination to bring a genuine transformation in me, because I think when I have that courage, that incredible courage, to not just a superficial shift or change, but a genuinely deep change in myself, I think we really win the love and respect of Baba. And one of the things which has really sort of been going around inside my mind over the last, season or two is just something simple that Baba said. And you know how Baba has that ability to say the most simple thing and yet somehow it penetrates deeply. And Baba was saying that, he said this year, for self-progress, to let go the eye of arrogance and the eye of disheartenment and emerge the eye of soul consciousness. And that really, really touched me, because almost immediately I began to think it's almost like inside my head I have 3 personalities sitting there, and it's like they're all vying for control. One is the eye of arrogance, and on the flip side of that is always this eye of disheartenment, as Baba uses that word. But the true eye, the authentic eye, the real eye, the one that we're trying to re-emerge, is that eye of soul consciousness. And sometimes I ask myself that question: does the eye of soul consciousness have the most influence? What do you think? Or is it pretty much equal between the 3? Because they're all powerful personalities. And even then, how much do I understand what is this eye of arrogance? What is the eye of disheartenment? And I might recognize it emerging in me in gross forms, but how does it actually emerge me, not even in subtle forms, but even in its most refined forms, or as Baba sometimes says, these royal forms? And so I just began this little sort of exercise in myself to look at these 3 eyes that sit in me and just see which one is influencing the most. And when I began to look at the 2 forms of the impure eye, the eye of arrogance and the eye of disheartenment, when I began to look at the eye of disheartenment, it to me is like the eye of superiority. And this eye will create thoughts, sometimes gross, but sometimes in subtle ways that, I am better than, I know more, I understand more. All these sorts of thoughts, that my perception of things is the accurate one. And one of the things I've really loved recently, because Baba sometimes gives us practical ways to understand these things. Baba was saying that one way that this eye of arrogance emerges is when I feel I am right. That feeling that I am right. That's such a deep feeling, because we all see a scene and we all feel so strongly that I perceive it in an accurate way. I perceive the truth. And yet, do we perceive the truth? That feeling of, Baba was saying, even that's how the eye of arrogance emerges in perhaps a very refined way. But I think the way that we can really understand this first eye is feelings, because feelings are very strong. And when I'm under these feelings, then I know that I'm under the influence of this eye of arrogance. The main one Baba talks about is feeling insulted. And how easily do we feel insulted? Just a word from another sometimes can prick, and those feelings of insult emerge. The feeling of being disrespected. Even perhaps a more refined form of this is when I don't feel I'm really valued. I'm special, but I'm not really valued to the extent that I feel I should be. Any hurt, in a way, tells me, when I feel it, that the eye of arrogance is ruling in my mind. Any feeling of hurt. And this eye of arrogance craves praise, and it craves, recognition and that sort of thing. And the eye of arrogance, I feel, is the eye that won't let go of the past. It's my ego that invests in the hurts of the past, and it's my ego that won't forgive the feelings associated with those hurts. And when I start to sort of create a picture, I begin to see when I'm under the influence of this eye. And one of the things I've noticed, because Baba's been saying a lot in the last few years, children, let go the habit of taking sorrow. This is an addiction we all have after half a cycle, so deep. But it's the eye of arrogance which actually accepts sorrow from others. And really, when I do accept sorrow, who is it? It's my ego. Because when I really taste that pure, original, clean self, the authentic self, that cannot be hurt. I cannot hurt the self when I'm in a soul-conscious state. In my pristine state, I cannot be hurt. So whenever I feel hurt, whenever I have even that subtle wave of sorrow washing through my mind, it's like then I begin to start to tell myself, yes, I'm under the influence of the eye of arrogance at that time. And so when I start to, see these sorts of things, I begin to see that, in a relationship with others, what happens when I come in touch with another person? Sometimes I think the most vulnerable thing in all of we Brahmins is our sensitivity to each other, Sometimes we're so... we prick each other. We can prick each other so easily. It's such a subtle thing. And what is actually happening? When someone does something, says something, even their presence makes me feel something, what is really hurting me? Is it what they've done or said or whatever? Or is it my reaction? And we all say, yes, of course, it's my reaction. We know that. And so who gives me sorrow? It's actually me giving myself sorrow. And when I think I really understand that, I think that's a huge step in eliminating the seeds of the eye of arrogance, when I really begin to take responsibility for how I feel. Because the way I'm thinking about relationships these days, because I think Baba's so wonderful, he gives us this beautiful family, because it's in the family that I can learn so much about myself. Because in a relationship, all that really happens is that you trigger what is already in me. You can't trigger anything new, really. All you do is when you come in front of me, or when you say something, when you do something, you will emerge what is already existing in me. It's a sanskar that's been pressed in the past. So in a sense, what relationships do is they reveal to me who I really am. And to me, I think that's a really healthy way of understanding relationships, that they actually educate me about what's inside me. And so if I come in front of somebody and a very strong feeling comes, when I'm under the eye of arrogance, I will point the finger. But when I'm under the eye of soul consciousness, I start to look at that. Why did I feel like that? What was it that made me react in such a way? Because the eye of arrogance will always make me react. But in a sense, the way I understand it anyway is that The eye of arrogance isn't the real impure eye. It's the other one Baba talks about, which is the eye of disheartenment. Because really, the eye of arrogance, the showy self, is actually just a cover for the real form of impurity, which is the eye of disheartenment. And this eye of disheartenment is the eye that makes me sometimes feel that no matter what I do, it's never good enough. You know those feelings? You know how you do something so well, and yet it's never good enough in your own eyes. We can never live up to our own expectations. It's this eye that feels that, others don't appreciate me, others don't like me, others don't love me, others don't want me around. It's really like the eye of disheartenment is the eye of inferiority in a sense. And this is the real eye that has been etched in the soul. And this is why I think Baba was saying that what we do is we swing from one side to the other. There may be a little bit of eye of arrogance, but mostly we swing over to this eye of disheartenment. And it seems to me, as much as we go to one side, that's how much we go to the other side. But what are the feelings that reveal when I'm under this influence of the eye of disheartenment? Hopelessness. Many times Baba talks about this, that sometimes I think, this long journey that we've all been on, we're old souls. Sometimes I think we just gave up that we would ever find where I belong, ever find God. And so sometimes that sanskar to just feel a bit hopeless, to feel sometimes deeply inferior to others, that others are always better than me. These are the feelings that emerge. The feelings of weak, that I'm weak or disempowered. These feelings are very, very strong sometimes. And when I'm under these feelings, then I know that the eye of disheartenment, the eye of inferiority, or the eye of lack of self-respect is ruling inside my mind. That's the power that has taken control and is sitting in the throne inside of me. And sometimes, I don't know about you, but I've been amazed at the power of this eye. It's such a strong one, isn't it, sometimes? It's so strong. And sometimes when we come to Baba, we intellectually understand what's going, but the force of the feeling is still very strong. And this is really the journey, because I sometimes have the image in my mind that if we were to have a movie of me in the second half of the cycle, I think it'd be a very interesting film to watch. Just seeing myself, what was I doing? We're the souls. I'm sure that we get to a certain point in our life and we only feel comfortable when we seek out our truth, when we live our truth. And so we're the ones who'd go to all the temples, all the churches, the mosques, the synagogues, whatever they may be. And yet, what is happening? I often see that for life after life, year after year, day after day, oh God, you're so pure. Oh deity, you're so pure. And I'm so low and I'm so impure. Just imagine doing that day in, day out, life in, life out. It's etched something so profoundly strong inside me. And this is why this Baba was saying, children, surrender this eye of disheartenment, because it's this eye that holds me back. Because to me, when this eye of disheartenment is in power inside of me, it's like a filter through which I see everything. I see myself in that way, in a weak or negative or inferior way. I look at others in a similar way. My whole vision is through this filter, and all my relationships through that filter. I think it's reality. And yet actually I've put on the filter of disheartenment, and that's actually how I'm perceiving everything around me. And the eye of disheartenment actually gives sorrow, is the one that takes sorrow from the self. And how sometimes, we go through a day, we interact with people, sometimes people make comments, about us. Sometimes we feel we make a mistake. Sometimes we feel someone doesn't like me. And then what do? The eye of disheartenment, what I find, it kicks in and it rejects me. You know how sometimes there's almost a force inside that says, you're no good, you're bad, you're silly. You know, it's like a self-rejection in that way. And really, to me, I remember once Daddy Janki saying, the most tamo pradhan force is rejection. You know, just think in the Golden Age, it's a world of belonging. The Golden Age is just this amazing sense that I belong. We belong to each other in such a profound way. It's like this incredible family. And by the end of the cycle, the soul feels disconnected. And the most hurtful thing is rejection. If we see another person pushing someone away, we'd say, no, that's wrong, that's not good. And yet, we often do it to the self on a regular basis, this internal, observation of my behavior or my whatever I do. I push myself away, I reject myself. And I think this does an incredible amount of damage. I was once at a Buddhist conference, and we were talking about violence, and because one of the things of Buddhism is non-violence, and it was a really interesting discussion because we were talking about what is the seed of non-violence, or should I say violence. And we just went back and back, and we came to that point that the first violence is really against the self, thoughts against the self, a rejection of me. And when I begin to do this, I think that creates so much damage. And so what we begin to see, I think what Baba was saying, that children, on the one hand, you have this eye of arrogance, surrender it. On the other hand, we have this eye of disheartenment. We sort of oscillate between the two. But the middle path, if I can say, is the eye of soul consciousness. And Baba said, children emerge that. Because it's like when I genuinely emerge it, the other two lose their influence. And one way that I love to describe the feeling of soul consciousness for me these days is it's just like a coming home to a place in myself where I really belong. You know when you just feel really comfortable. There's a lovely feeling that I'm sitting in this right place. And in this place, I don't have to prove anything, I don't have to be anything, I don't have to impress anyone. I have no expectations of my own or others. I just feel absolutely at ease and comfortable. I think it's a beautiful thing because the eye of arrogance, the eye of disheartenment put pressure to be something. And when I really think about this, and when I begin to observe this, I start to think, yes, I've got to really go deeper into soul consciousness. And many of us see how these three eyes are competing, and I've really got to go deeper into soul consciousness. It's the first subject of this life. And so we start to practice. And we really start to practice. I'm a soul, I'm a tiny point of light. I'm non-physical. We really start to practice. And especially when I think we start, we all go around saying, I'm a soul, and we look at everyone, you're a soul. We walk down the street in the city. Have you done that? And everyone's a soul, and it's really a magical feeling. But sometimes after a while, we feel, or often I've heard from BKs, and even my own experience, that we've invested so much effort in soul consciousness, but I don't really feel I've received the fruit of all the investment. Have you had that experience? I think that's a common experience. One of the reasons I feel is that even though I'm practicing to be a soul, I still identify with the old eyes, On one hand, I'm trying to be a soul, but I'm holding on to these impure forms of I, the eye of arrogance and the eye of disheartenment. And that's why I think that soul consciousness is this constant process which I've got to create in my life. I think many times we hear I'm a soul and I believe, and I say, you know, Baba says you're a soul, and I say, yes, Baba, I'm a soul. But how we transform a belief into a feeling of being a soul, that's a huge journey, isn't it? Honestly, to me, that's one of my main focuses in this life. It's easy to know, it's easy to believe, but to keep working on the feeling so that I emerge the feeling of soul consciousness in myself. Because my own experience is, as I really navigate deeply inside to touch that original true me, what happens is that as I go deeper and deeper, all these forms of the old eyes begin to emerge in their gross, subtle, and refined forms to influence me. But if I keep at it, I come to this point, you know, this authentic, clean space within myself, which isn't influenced by the wrong eye, the eye of arrogance, the eye of superiority, or the eye of disheartenment, the eye of inferiority. And that is like such a clean feeling. To me, that's true purity. Absolute purity, and that's the really deep silence when I can navigate inside and taste that feeling. It is such a beautiful feeling. But I do think it does take a lot of wisdom, because even recently, just a few days ago, a group of us were sitting together and we're just saying, and you know, my own personal experience is that as I go deeper on this journey, what I've noticed is that in our past lives, I think in all our bhakti, we've built all these layers of deception to deceive myself, you know, about really who I am. Because sometimes it's hard to look at myself so honestly. And so sometimes to remove this self-deception, to come to that point where I just sit in that clean, authentic, simple space of just being an eternal soul, a child of God. It's a lifetime's work, really, to reach there. That's what I feel. And, you know, over the past few years, many years really, one of the things I find every season is that Baba says, you know, children, practice being bodiless. You know how Baba is always saying that. And Baba said that you have to practice this over a long period of time, because if we don't, when it comes the time, you'll have to make effort or we will be battling. And even sometimes Baba says, children, this is the last paper to be bodiless, you know, just to let go everything and become that authentic, true, clean soul. And you know, it just made me think it's an incredible thing that we study at a university. We study every day. And yet ultimately, the ultimate result of all our study and learning is just this 1 second practice, isn't it? It's like we learn for a lifetime. All of us wake up every day. We study, we meditate. And yet what's it for? It's ultimately to let go everything in just a second. Isn't it amazing that we have to absorb the ocean of knowledge to ultimately develop this amazing art that to let go the consciousness of my body in just a second, to let go the consciousness of all my relationships, to let go even the consciousness of service, or I'm a server, and all the things associated, my roles and responsibilities, you know, to let all of that go in just a second, to become like naked, in a sense. That's our study, that's our ultimate journey. Once I was even thinking, it's like letting go everything that sustained me for the second half of the cycle. Because we've built up all these networks to give me sustenance, to let go all the forms of identity and just become that bodiless soul. This is such an incredible thing. And you know, when I practice this, what I've personally found is that, you know, when you stop, if you know, in this recent thing, how we have that 1 minute traffic control every hour, if really honestly, what happens during that minute? I tell you, if I'm honest with myself, I'm amazed sometimes. Yes, sometimes you really go there. But you know, many times the remnants of all the thinking just keep going, you know? And you stop, but what's happening in the mind? But you know what I've really found is the compulsion to keep doing what I'm doing. You know how when you're in the middle of a job and you're really fired up and you're really enjoying it, and then to stop and let it all go, in a sense, for a minute, is it easy? I don't think it's that easy. And you know, the realization how sort of addicted we are to doing, because I think that's sustained us for a long time. And so, you know, really when we observe the self, how much have we really developed this fitness? Because to me it's like the training or the fitness in this spiritual life is this ability to go deep and let go and let go and let go and come to that sort of authentic space. And when I began to practice this, you know, what I found was a really sort of interesting thing is that basically it revealed to me where I was at. Because if you sit down and say with a determined thought, I'm going to let go and become the seed, the bodiless soul, what happens, what I found is that it reveals to me where I'm stuck. Because whatever trivial thoughts or waste thoughts, whatever sort of analysis is going on in my mind or processing, you know, you get stuck. What happens is you can't go to that seed because you get stuck somewhere, you know? And what it does, it sort of shows me where I'm stuck. It reveals to me where I'm at. It also reveals to me, secondly, where I can't let go and where I'm holding on. In other words, really what my attachments are. When I start this ultimate process of going back to my truth, this seed, I get, you know, I find that I can't let go at some points. Let go, whether it is a relationship and subtle feelings about a relationship, whether it is a role, a responsibility, whether it is an achievement, whether it is a hurt from the past, you know, the mind gets stuck on it. You know how you sort of get mentally stuck? You can't let go of the thought. So I'm trying to go deeper, and yet I get stuck. Even it reveals to me, thirdly, what bondages I have, you know, the bondages of the past, you know, the bondages of expectations. It even reveals to me where I take support from others, because as I start this letting go, my mind will go to where I'm, you know, personalities and things that I'm taking support from. And in a sense, it's a wonderful thing, because it sort of reveals to me where I'm at and what work I need to do to really emerge the I of soul consciousness. Because I can tell you, I believe till this day that the reason we find a lack of progress is a lack of soul consciousness. The reason we find meditation difficult is a lack of soul consciousness. The reason we find it difficult to connect with Baba is that we haven't done the deep work that is really required in soul consciousness. And I remember a few years ago, some of us sat with Daddy Ratan Mohini, and it was a lovely conversation, and she was just describing the early days of the yagya. And it was amazing, just the atmosphere Brahma Baba built up of this gentle self-attention to really become the soul, and therefore dismantle all this structure of this I of arrogance and this I of disheartenment, which has deceived me so much. And Baba, you know, even when he met the children, he would, you know, really see them as the soul, remind them they're a soul. You know, everything they did, he would remind them, I, the soul, am talking to you, the soul. You know, it was like such a deep practice, just because the habit is so profoundly deep. And I think in a way, if I want to get the strength in this life, I have to fathom the depths of soul consciousness and really set up experiments for myself in the laboratory of my mind. And just a few days ago, someone gave me a sheet and about transformation. Some of you may have received this. And on this sheet, it was actually Prashant from Cambridge, and he was saying that, you know, it's a strange thought in one sense, but he said, really, our body is 99% vacuum. You know? I don't know whether that makes sense to you, but it just struck me. It's like, it looks very solid, and yet really in the reality of things, it's almost like a hologram around the soul, you know? It's there, and it's a temporary expression which we're expressing through, but we've built up so much, you know, validity around this particular thing. And yet when I start to do the experiments, what I think is that I love to experiment with how I can change all the ideas of soul consciousness into the feelings, whether it be the form of the soul, just a point, nothing smaller, or whether it is the eternal nature of the soul. What does that feel like? What does it feel like? I think all these things, and one of the experiments which I've loved to do over the last few years is an experiment about being incorporeal. What are the feelings of being a non-physical being sitting in this body? Because, you know, what I've found personally, as I start to not just sort of think and believe it, but really start to feel a gentle separateness from my body in the material world, naturally I feel uninfluenced by drama. And it's a really beautiful thing. You feel more the master. You know how often we feel so controlled by drama? You know, like the scenes of drama are just completely controlling my thinking and my mind. It's so strong. And I feel a victim, like drama's pushing me around. But the more I taste the feeling of being a non-physical being, actually sitting in this physical body, then it's almost like naturally I feel less influenced by everything around me. And ultimately, when I sit in that beautiful space, when I emerge that soul-conscious eye that Baba talked about, it's an eye that can't be influenced at all. It's a journey, of course, but that's where we want to go. But when rather than just saying I shouldn't be influenced, you know, we chant the mantra, when I'm in my true state as the incorporeal soul, naturally I'm not influenced. And so these sort of practices, you know, are really lovely to develop. And just the other day when we were in the NCO meeting, Sister Genti was sharing something which I really related to. Because, you know, when we hear these things, we try to practice soul consciousness. And she said, still, you know, to become a seed in a second, you know, it's not a small thing. And why is it difficult? And she was just saying that last year Daddy Janki was saying how one of the reasons is that we don't have the power to merge. And what happens is that during a day we hear things from people, we hear stories, maybe gossip or lots of information, we see things. And this is all recorded on my memory track. And so when I sit to meditate, what pops back in the mind, you know? It's all the unprocessed stuff of the day just emerges in my mind, and we spend all our meditation time sifting through my thoughts and feelings associated with personalities and situations. And what she was saying, and it made a lot of sense to me, is that if we have the power to merge, then we don't let it sort of record on my intellect in that sense. Instantly we merge, and that in a sense keeps my intellect a bit free, so that when I need to, I can really let go and go beyond. And I think that, you know, I really related to that in the sense that we go along in the day and we listen to things and we see things, and it actually builds up in my mind, and when I sit to meditate, I spend a lot of my time processing my feelings associated. So I don't really become the seed, and so I don't really, absorb that real strength from having a connection with Baba. Because even many times I've had the feeling, many of us when we meditate, we sit and believe in Baba. Because really to connect, I've got to be on the same wavelength. I've got to become a bodiless soul like Baba is. And to me, this is, once again, this deep work of, as Baba said, emerge the feelings of soul consciousness in me. Because sometimes I think that we sit down and we try to meditate and my mind's all over the place, and we say, oh, it's too difficult, I can't meditate. Because in a sense, that ability to become bodiless is a product of all aspects of my spiritual life. That's how I think of it. It's my understanding of the knowledge. It's my, shall we say, my ability, my renunciation. It's my love for Baba. It's the quality of my relationships with others. It's all like, all these things are like a pyramid which brings me to a point which releases the soul and to go beyond. And if they're not accurate, then they really do pull my mind at that time. And so what I was really thinking is that to become that bodiless soul as Baba wants, then it's like it's a summation of all aspects of my life. All of them have to be accurate, and then I'm able to be released and go beyond. And so it's, I think that really letting go the impure forms of, I, and really emerging, the I of soul consciousness, shall we say, the original I, is the deep work of this life. It's a very, very, deep work. And what I've really found sometimes in my experiments within myself is that, to really let go these old feelings and emerge these new feelings, it just takes, a lot of attention over quite a long period of time. And these are the sort of practices which I feel we have to really emerge in the self, to go really deep into the self so that I can really taste that I, that original I, that I of soul consciousness, that true I, and let go the impure forms of I. And so this is what I've personally, found on my sort of experimentation and recently is, to let go these sort of feelings of the I of, body consciousness and really emerge, the I of soul consciousness to that sort of level which I really would like to. So I'm just wondering whether any of you would like to ask anything or ask any questions, because we've just got a few minutes left, because I think at 7 o'clock we have meditation. If there's anyone who would like to ask any questions, I don't know whether we've got a microphone, please feel free.
Shanti. When you were saying that how difficult it is to become just a point or bodiless, I'm a baby, in Baba's knowledge. It's not quite 5 years yet. But the practice I make, and I'm getting more proficient, I guess, is just to turn into an angel of light, really. And I really go like a spinning real fast and I take Baba's hand in the subtle world, and it's such a great feeling because then we all go all around the world in just 1 second, no? And I was wondering what is from there the next step to let go then that body of light, I guess, and then become just a point.
You know, all the stages have their benefits, there's no doubt, but, you know, I think to be able to let everything go in a second, because Baba said, you know, that'll be like the final paper, you know, to be able to let everything go and just become the seed. Because many times Baba says that if that hasn't been practiced over a long period of time, when it really comes to that time, the soul will struggle, or the soul will, you know, look for things, sort of dependent things, or pull it and that sort of thing. And that's why I think that really, in a sense, each time we sit to meditate, it's practicing this, isn't it? It's practicing this incredible process of, in a sense, letting go the artificial I, the wrong I, and really going deep into the I of soul consciousness. I don't know what you feel, but when I listen to the Sakar Mulis, I always find it incredible how there's not a muli where Baba doesn't really focus on soul consciousness, you know, because it's like our standard foundation practice of this life, because ultimately we were soul conscious and we've lost all that power, you know, over a long period of time. And this is what we really have to, you know, rebuild, is this deep practice of, you know, emerging that true I, which is that I of soul consciousness. And I think it's, you know, it's like a daily practice. It's like a daily practice which we have to really instill so deep, because, you know, the habits are just so strong within the self. Yeah. Is there anyone else who would like to ask something?
You know, in the question of not giving sorrow and taking sorrow, I wonder how you deal with, you know, when you intend to do something not giving sorrow, but some people might be so extremely easily hurt. So for anything you express, they will take sorrow. Be, you know, extremely oversensitive, and maybe sometimes because there is expectations from you that you're not aware of, so that your actions just, they take sorrow from that because of their expectations. You know, where is the line? You know, I'm trying to figure out often this, how you know, you can't take responsibility all the time, but you have to let go at some point. And you know, how to fulfill people's desires sometimes when it's exceeds certain limits.
What do you think? Is it easy to fulfill people's desires? You know, sometimes I think it's not that we're just sensitive, we're so hypersensitive. We're, you know, that's, you know, in that extreme state of body consciousness, you know, the hypersensitivity of the soul is just so great. And that's where I think I've learned over my Brahman life, is that, you know, sometimes you may say something to somebody which is absolutely innocent and their jaw drops, you know, you can just see that. And we feel bad. That's very much our human condition, isn't it? We take, I've hurt you, you know, but actually, if I really look at it, I haven't. It's the other soul sanskaras, and that way, of course, I'll be merciful. And in a way, it's like I have to educate myself not to, in a sense, take on board other people's sorrow, because, you know, really as the soul becomes more pure, it is less influenced by the sorrow of others around me. And it's an indication. It's not that I'm not insensitive to it. It's not that I won't be sympathetic to it. And it's not that I won't try to help you sort of not feel that, but I don't have to take on the burden. Because in the old days, I would say a comment innocently, your face goes, oh, like that, or something. And then I suddenly take on the burden of that. that's my own ego, isn't it? That's my body consciousness. And, you know, this sort of hypersensitivity, which seems to be inbuilt into us when we're body conscious, we have to really let that go, let that go. And that's why I think, you know, the eye of, you know, as Baba was saying, these wrong eyes will always deceive me, in a sense, you know. They will always deceive me so that I won't be able to really clearly, you know, see what's going on. And then I start to take responsibility for your sorrow. Of course I should be compassionate and understanding, but it's a big education, isn't it? Not to take on board the sorrow of others around me. I think that's a huge education. And it's a huge step, because sometimes we almost think I have to go out in sympathy with you and feel the sorrow that you feel. But actually, if I remain stable in my stage, hopefully I can help you let go those feelings as well. But sensitivity, you know, in Brahma Baba's day, what I heard is that Baba was never, he didn't feel mercy for sensitivity. You know, sometimes we dance around each other's sensitivities. We feel someone's fragile. I mustn't say anything that's going to hurt you. But Baba, he wasn't really, you know, he wanted to, you know, if I can say, toughen up the children, and this fragility about tippy-toeing round others' feelings in that way. Not to be like a, as they would say, a bull in a china shop, that I become reckless with other people's feelings. That's not good either. But at the same time, not so delicate and not so sensitive. I think it's really, really an important thing. Is there anyone else who would like to? Yes, oh.
Hello, thank you for the talk. I wondered if you could explain a little bit more about what do we do when we realize we are dealing with the subtler forms of the eye of disheartenment and the eye of arrogance. What is the most practical thing to do?
The practical thing to do? I think just, you know, it's just a long-term, because we oscillate, don't we? We oscillate from one side to the other. You know, sometimes we're under the influence of the eye of disheartenment, and sometimes the eye of arrogance. We can say, what do we go from one to the other? It's just instilling the deep practice of soul consciousness, because ultimately that's the true I that I have to really re-emerge in myself. And that's why I don't think there's any trick and there's no secret. It's a daily practice. And like I was saying, in the beginning of the yajna, Baba created such an atmosphere of soul-conscious practice. You know that this is like the first subject, and in a way we can't even link with Baba until I'm truly soul-conscious. The reason why we find it challenging is because we haven't done the foundation work in fathoming the depths of soul consciousness, doing these experiments in my mind so that I really taste the depth and subtlety of soul consciousness. And so this is why we fluctuate from disheartenment to, you know, arrogance and this sort of thing. We go from one side to the other, lack of self-respect to ego, because they're closely related. And often as much as I have ego, that's how much lack of self-respect I have too. But the eye of soul consciousness is really like the middle path. That's the real I that I really have to do the groundwork to establish in myself. And you know, when we used to sometimes come here in the early days, we sometimes used to go deep into practices for days at a time. I did this too, where I absolutely just take one thought and try to go into the depth of a soul-conscious practice so that I change a point of theory and belief into a point of genuine experience. To me, that's always my quest. How do I change a belief that I'm a soul? If you ask, 80% of the world believes that there's something more than a body. But Baba's given us the knowledge of the soul, and we have to transform the belief into an experience. And that's why I have to use my mind as a laboratory to do experiments in my mind so that I start to taste the feeling of what it means to be incorporeal, what it means to be eternal. What are the feelings associated? Because I think, many times what we really want, the stability we want in our Brahman life, etc., just comes from these fundamental practices of soul consciousness. And the way I read the Sakamuli is Brahma Baba, this is where his attention was. Shiv Baba's the ocean of knowledge. He came into Brahma Baba, but Brahma Baba put all his attention towards these fundamental practices to re-emerge, that true depth of soul consciousness in myself. I honestly believe my lack of ability to meditate is still the first lesson is superficial. It's superficial. To educate myself to let go, let go, let go, to become the eternal seed, this point which exists but has no physical size. The reality of that is incredible. It's such a deep thing. And this is like a daily education of myself that I have to go into really deeply, because it's then that really I start to sow the seeds of deep soul consciousness. And when I sow the seeds of soul consciousness truly, naturally I'm not influenced by people. Naturally I'm less sensitive. All the things I want will emerge when I've sown the seeds of soul consciousness. And really, I'm able to connect properly with Baba. Because sometimes I use the example that when I'm body conscious, it's like I'm on the AM dial, on a radio, and God's on the FM dial. Now, the FM dial exists, but you can't tune in. I actually have to go up to the FM dial. I have to become soul conscious totally to resonate on the same frequency as Baba, to really have that deep connection with Baba. And so this is like the deep work that I have to put in myself to really emerge those deep feelings of soul consciousness.
First of all, it was a very good dissection that you have done so far. But the question that I have is relating back to the soul conscious thing that you're talking about. Naturally, I personally, when I make efforts, I assume that when I do my Amrit Velas and I do my traffic control, I expect that things are going to fall in place. When I say fall in place, I mean I'm naturally going to get the experience. But it doesn't happen. Despite, you can have a waiting period, say about for 5 months, 6 months, or maybe 1 month, or whatever it is. Since you're following it regularly on a consistent basis, experience doesn't come through. As versus, you said a comment that you have to work on yourself. Wouldn't you say that is pretty much equivalent to working on yourself? Where is the gap? I just wanted some enlightenment on that.
When I began, I realized that the way I was brought up, we're brought up to, in a sense, understand rational thinking, which is when we take an idea and we go A, B, C, D, and we come to a conclusion. And we learn that in our modern education, which is really important. And I also think we learn creative thinking, where we take an idea and we let it grow and embellish and develop, But experiential thinking, where we take an idea and I massage it into my feelings, I feel it. So I take a point of theory, and with my meditative practice, I transform it into a feeling inside. To me, this is what meditation is. And this is the patience I need to educate myself how to do this. Because often we just sit there thinking, and yet really using the knowledge, I actually let myself detach from my body and become this tiny seed. To me, the more I have the art of detaching from the body, the more I enter the realm of spiritual feelings and experiences. And this is what sustains me. And this is like, it's almost like I have to educate myself how to experience. Because I can tell you, I realized when I began that often we sit there just churning, which is good. or often we sit there believing in the ideas, but to transform knowledge and create a feeling, that's what meditation is really about. It's the feelings that sustain me. And this is the real work, I think, to go really deep into, learning or educating myself how to experience. Because once I asked Brother Jagdish, who was the senior brother of the whole yajna, he left his body some years ago, and I said, what is the most important thing for a Brahmin? And he said, new experiences. Because often we have experiences in childhood. When you first come, you have magical experiences, but then they go. And it's more faith sustaining me, and that's like a devotee. It's like I have to become the master in how to create new experiences in myself. And so it's almost like to see my mind's a laboratory. And when I put in different thoughts and mix them, I'm going to actually create new feelings. And I've got to keep experimenting. But to me, the key for creating feelings and experience which sustain me is this ability to detach from the body. And this is almost like the daily practice, letting go, letting go, letting go, becoming the seed. And sometimes I remember when I first came, there was a muli, and these days we revise the Sakal Mulis, I think from 65 to 69, but I remember there was a muli, and Baba was saying, children, wake up early in the morning and sit quietly and start to think, who am I? I'm just a tiny soul. And go smaller and smaller and smaller. There's nothing smaller than the human soul. Keep letting go, keep letting go. And the whole Muli, Baba was sort of almost giving us a commentary in this incredible practice of going smaller and smaller and smaller until I reach the incredible nature, the true nature of the self as this point which exists but has no real size in a sense, this incredible education of letting go. Because the more I let go my identification with matter, the more I create spiritual experience. The more I have spiritual experience, the more it sustains me. The more I have deep feelings of love, deep feelings of purity, deep feelings of peace. They're the rich feelings that really sustain the heart and keep me motivated. If it's just sitting on an intellectual level, it becomes very dry. And this is, I think, one of the great wisdoms. Easy to know, easy to believe. The work is in experiencing. Sometimes I feel the first step is to know, the second step to believe, the next 998 is to educate myself how to transform it into a feeling inside. That's really, I think, the work that I need to educate myself. And a lot of it, I think, depends on my ability to detach from the body. The more I can detach from the body, the more I seem to enter the world of spiritual experience. So it's like I have to educate myself. And this is some of the deeper work I think is really necessary in Brahman life. Okay.
I like to add, instead of thinking that I have to become soul conscious, I should think, I am a soul. And for the scientists, I would say, like, they say the body means, like we say, it is matter, 5 elements, and the body is made of atomic particles. And the soul in Hindi is called Atma, and it's atom. Atom which is indivisible, indestructible, it's so tiny. And just we think, I am a soul, I am a soul. We don't have to become soul conscious. Is it okay? He knows better.
It's often terminology, isn't it? But, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I can tell you in my journey, when I started, I was absolutely into practicing soul consciousness, And then after a while, you tend to get into churning all sorts of things. But after a while, I came right back to that fundamental practice, because I really began to see in the Sakal Muli, that's where Baba puts his attention. And it's where we have to become experts. And it's like my own research in the laboratory of my mind to become that tiny soul. This is the ultimate result of all my study. And I think then I'm resonating on the same frequency with Baba. I feel absolutely in Baba's world, close to Baba, loved by Baba, connected to Baba. And it's like when I go into that seat, it almost automatically resumes or reawakens all the latent power within the self. I honestly believe for myself that a lot of what still remains to be done is even deeper and deeper and deeper steps into soul consciousness, the foundation. It's really lovely. Anyway, we should have some meditation because it's almost 7:10. And so let's just sit in a powerful stage of soul consciousness. And if you'll excuse me, I'm going to have to disappear.